still have faith?
Faith hasn't been my problem. I gave up everything to follow you. But you're healing total strangers!
Why do you think I allowed trials?
I don't know!
They prove the genuineness of your faith. They strengthen you. This is strengthening you. And Eden. Keep your eyes on me.
Keep your eyes on me. These hard times are what strengthens you, Simon. This is strengthening your faith and Eden's faith as well. Immediately in season 3, episode 8 of The Chosen, we see that Simon has turned his relationship with Jesus into that which is a special one, and how Simon has, in fact, not understood where the faith lies this entire time, and we get to see Jesus walk with Simon back to where faith truly lies and where his strength is within. Welcome back to another episode of Through the Lens with your favorite trauma coach, Ashley. Strap yourself in. Today's trip is The Chosen, season 3, episode 8, when Simon and Jesus walk on water. Wow, what a powerful message and a beautiful representation of what's really going on within us, what the inner dialogue has the ability to look like, which is we all have the ability to walk on water. And today we are going to dissect this and see how that is truly possible and how we easily turn our relationships into those that are special, which will always disappoint us and will immediately turn from that of love into hate because it's really bringing forward what's going on within. So we see immediately Jesus, he shows up, and if you watch the episodes prior to this, Simon has lost his faith because when he found Jesus and Jesus did the fish, if you haven't checked that video out yet about the miracle, please go check that out. That is the miracle of the fish. And in that moment is when Simon's like, oh my gosh, Jesus, you are the answer. And we can see now that that is the moment that the special relationship started, that Simon had these expectations that as long as I follow you, Jesus, and mind you, these are subconsciously, everything in my life will always turn out the way in which I believe is the right way for me, which in the moment of the miracle of the fish, it was getting the fish so he could pay his taxes. When in fact, what Jesus was showing him is that it was always within you, Simon, but Simon didn't get that. Simon got that this guy holds all my answers. All of my ability to live a life of love and happiness and peace can only be found in this man, Jesus. That's why I must follow him. So we fast forward and Simon is, going with Jesus to share the word and to help with all of the miracles and the signs and wonders that Jesus is doing to help people be able to see the truth. Mind you, his wife is back home having a miscarriage. Simon doesn't know, and we see in the episode where he ends up back home and finding out his relationship with his wife is strained for a period of time because she feels so much shame and guilt around the loss of this baby. And immediately we see that Simon projects this out onto Jesus. His relationship that was special love with Jesus and loving him so much and following him in a drop of a hat turned to that of hate, of anger and resentment and frustration, and it being Jesus' fault. And why was everybody else worthy of this? When he was the one who sacrificed everything, he should for sure be worthy. Again, we talk about that. There's nothing to actually sacrifice. So Simon was actually not doing anything different than anyone else at the level of content. And that's what we see here is that at the level of form, he had become a follower of Jesus. He had become this trusting individual who believed in the message Jesus was sharing. But at the level of content, he had not shifted from the ego belief system. He was still in the ego belief system of separation and sacrifice and hierarchy, right? In special relationships, we see that we have something to gain from someone. And in any special relationship, it is the smoke and mirrors that keeps us from really addressing what's going on within, which is the shame and guilt. Ken Wapnick says it beautifully. He talks about a jar and placing instant coffee grounds in the bottom of the jar and then the water, and they sink to the bottom if you don't mix them. Well, that is the shame and guilt that is within. And then placing the lid on is actually the special relationship. So you don't ever have to deal with it. You don't have to shake it up. You don't have to address it. But when that lid fails us, we are forced to, all that comes out. And that's what we see here with Simon. He's lost faith in Jesus because despite what he has seen, he is no longer directly experiencing it at the level of form. Therefore, the expectations of his relationship with Jesus are not being met. The specialness of it is not being met. So Jesus shows up and they're in the boat, and Simon's been irritated with them, and they had just had the preachings on the hill where Jesus, turned bread and fish, just continuous amounts in order to feed all of the people. So Simon continues to see him do these things for other people, but Simon, a piece of him still remains, and that is all of us. We all are not fully in fear. We all have the Holy Spirit's belief system within us. It doesn't go away. We just choose not to hear that voice. We choose to listen to the other voice. And you can kind of see Simon teeter back and forth because he knows truth within. He knows that the ego is not where he wants to be, but he continues to go there because what he sees at the level of form tells him so differently, that his wife had to suffer. And Jesus comes to the boat, and immediately Simon asks him to command him to get out. And Jesus is like, will you step out with the faith needed to walk on water? But Simon's interpretation, he continues to view it through the ego's lens of, no, you command me. You have the power, Jesus, not me. And because Jesus has separated, he has renounced the ego. He is no longer living in the ego. And when you're not living in the ego, you don't see the ego in others. So Jesus never directly addresses that with Simon and never says, hey, it's you, it's not me. Because first of all, he probably doesn't even realize that Simon is coming from that place, and it does no good to do that because acknowledging the ego is exactly what we don't want to do. We want to renounce the ego. We no longer want to be tied to the ego. So Simon continues to say, yes, I have faith. Faith has not been my issue. I have literally given you everything. I have sacrificed everything to follow you because of my faith. Again, red flag, it was a special relationship. Red flag that he had expectations because he felt that he had to give up things in order to be a part of this relationship. But by him giving up, then he has expectations that Jesus is going to fulfill a need. And we know that subconsciously that need he believed Jesus was filling was actually his own shame and guilt and wanting to put the lid on the jar. How often do we do that? Seek out special relationships that we need them to be that smoke and mirrors to not face our own internal shame and guilt. An example for me was my marriage, and when the divorce occurred, I literally, the day the divorce happened, which was like the final straw of losing everything outside of me, all those special relationships, I came home from my divorce hearing and got down on my knees and cussed God and Jesus. And I said, what did I do wrong to deserve such pain and heartache and suffering? And at one point I was like, are you happy? Are you happy that I am in this much pain? And that's really what Simon is saying to Jesus, because we both had a special relationship. He had one with Jesus. I had one with God and Jesus, which are the same. So they were essentially the same thing, but it was special. How often do you find yourself asking God for specific things or thanking him for specific things. He has nothing to do with that, first of all. And we see that Jesus says to him that these things that are occurring that appear painful are used to strengthen your faith. So some people would interpret that as like you have to experience the hard. God makes things hard in order to make you worthy. No, that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is that the Holy Spirit is utilizing these heartaches, these hard times as opportunities for you to practice forgiveness, for you to realize that this is all a dream and this is your projection of your own internal dialogue. Therefore, it's not even happening. That is what Jesus is saying here, and that is what Jesus has done. Right? He talks about strengthening your faith, and when Simon steps out on the water, he continuously is like, do you have the faith to walk on water? Which means, have you completely renounced the ego and see this illusion for what it is, therefore you can walk on water. And this is not like just intellectualizing this. I can tell you intellectually that this is an illusion, the Holy Spirit, all this. I can't go walk on water today because the problem is my subconscious is still so wrapped up to the ego that I don't have that ability. That is part of this constant battles in our lives that have been set up by ourselves because we, with the ego, created this ego script, and the script can be used as the Holy Spirit script in order for us to get back home as remembrance. So when we have these difficult times, we have two opportunities. Do we utilize this time to practice forgiveness and remind us of truth, which is that we cannot be hurt, we are unconditional love, eternal, we can't die, we can't be hurt, we don't sin, or do we use this to ground ourselves further into the ego illusion and into the narrative that we are bad, that we need to sacrifice and suffer because of the shame and guilt of the initial separation? That is a conversation for another day. And Simon has this beautiful opportunity led by Jesus without consciously knowing what's really going on, where Jesus allows him to go back and remember where the truth is, what he's actually seeking faith in. Simon believes it's faith in Jesus, Jesus as a body. When in fact, Jesus is like, nah, man, it has nothing to do with me being a body, and it has everything to do with what I symbolize, which is what is within you. We are one, man. We are one in the same. I just happen to appear in the illusion that I figured crap out a lot quicker than you did. So Simon ends up falling in the water. That we didn't see, but he ends up falling in the water because in that moment, it was that representation, I believe, of him shifting from Jesus as the body, having faith in him, to the symbol of Jesus and finding the faith within himself and realizing they are one. And it's symbolic. Jesus reaches his hand down. And I think that's the symbolism of, in that moment, Simon realizing that they are one, that they are no different. That's what a special relationship does, is it separated him from Jesus. It made him believe that there was this hierarchy and Jesus was above him and could provide him with things that he could not provide himself. But in that moment that Jesus reached under the water, Simon was like, we've always been one. And then, of course, the representation at the level of form, he's like, never let me go. Don't put me down. Never let me go. And his wife later is like, don't let him go. Don't put him down. And really, Jesus says perfectly, keep your eyes on me. That is the goal here. Keep your eyes on our big brother that is here to guide us on our way out. And Simon, again, it was represent the level of form of do not let me down. Do not put me down physically. He's like holding him. But really, it was him knowing that we are one. But he was also asking for the strength of Jesus to help him remember that and to continue to hold him. But it really was up to Simon the entire time. It was up to Simon to request that. It was up to Simon to go within. Jesus could never put anything upon Simon. That is the thing. Nobody can do anything to you. Jesus can't. God can't. Other people outside of you. these special relationships are just a smoke and mirrors, and they can show up in relationships with people, with animals. I'm going to do a video on dogs. Check that video out. But it can show up in anything that you believe is outside of you that is providing you something. I mean, technically, eating food could be seen as a special relationship, but it all depends on what the weight is you place for if it no longer fulfills the need you are seeking. I really think that's the key that I have found in regards to special relationship. And, that was just an absolute beautiful representation of a special relationship and how the Holy Spirit uses the script in order to get you home, and a reminder that God is not purposely harming you or making you sacrifice or experience pain, just like Jesus said to him. Instead, it is a part of this journey home, and it is up to you how you perceive it, because if you perceive it with the Holy Spirit or with love or with Jesus or with God, you will not feel the pain and suffering. You will see it for what it is, which is just another walking stick on your journey back home. But if you choose to watch your movie with the ego, my friend, if you choose to view these times in your life through the ego lens, I promise you will have a life filled with pain and suffering and questioning why me, and viewing all the people outside of you as having a better life than you. Oh my gosh, The Chosen, I love it. This week, Patrick's like, what video are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. He's like, why don't you do The Chosen? You love them. And I do so much because I think the key points are there. And many of us have heard the stories of the Bible, and The Chosen, of course, is a beautiful representation of them. But then this allows us to even unpack those stories at a deeper level of understanding that you're not here to identify with the crucified Jesus. You're here to identify with the resurrected Jesus, your big brother who figured it out first. That was our trip for today, my friends. I hope you had an amazing adventure. As always, make sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Please hop in the comments. What realizations did this bring you today in regards to where are you having these special relationships and placing the weight when really it's just a cover for that jar for you to avoid the truth that is within? And instead, turning those relationships into the holy relationships they are, which is this walking stick to your own internal dialogue, to healing that. As always, my friend, thank you so much. Remember, you are worth it. Bye-bye.